So the first case study that we're going to go through, and actually, funnily enough, like these guys are, I've migrated to Donegal during COVID, and these guys aren't that far away. And it was actually Joanna who suggested that we talk about these guys, and I had the pleasure of doing a little mini interview with James last week, and what they have done with their company. So they're a distiller. They manufacture, they distill and sell gin, vodka, and whiskey. And I would highly recommend their red. So their red whiskey. It's called Silky. It's absolutely gorgeous. But what they did when COVID came along was that they decided that they weren't going to stand and wait, until the new norm had actually created itself or had kind of settled. They wanted to actually adapt there and then. And they were looking around the community. So it's run, this organization, there's about maybe 14 of them in the organization. And Moira, it's run by a husband and wife, James and Moira Doherty. And Moira came from a nursing background. And immediately the first thing that they thought about was how horrendous, they saw COVID stick around for 2 to 4 years. And they saw how horrendous, hand sanitizer can be and how harsh it can be on your hands. So what they did was, the first thing, I suppose they did 2 things, was that they needed to kind of try and create a new channel for selling. So one of the first things they did was, within a 3-week period, they stood up, they reviewed all the different laws around whether you can sell alcohol online, because no other distiller had ever done it directly. They looked at the law for it. It was vague. It was, obviously there could be a challenge yet on it, but they basically, within the space of 3 weeks, launched a website and started selling and released some special edition whiskies online. And within 4 weeks, they had those sold out, because they had absolutely no competitors. Nobody had ever actually sold liquor online directly from their distillers in Ireland. And now all the other distillers are actually following, and they had just conversations with the other distillers, some of their competitors, and they were all like, oh, we don't know. And they just went ahead and they took that risk, and they did it, and they sold out. So this was one of their things. But one of the other things that they did when COVID came along was that they thought, right, well, what can we do for the community? So what they did was, and this I absolutely love, is that they went and created, and this goes back to the point that we were discussing from the questions that we went through, which was around, okay, so looking into a different vertical and actually creating a different product, because this was, how were they were, they're only kind of going since, I think maybe they're probably about 3 or 4 years, 5 years, maybe max in the running. And they're still trying to get their brand out there. So what they did was they created a hand sanitizer. Moira had experience of how, from being a nurse, as to how harsh hand sanitizer could be. So they worked with a local company, they got some seaweed extract, and they got a license from the government in a really short period of time to go and create hand sanitizer using their waste alcohol. And so it was something that they were throwing out. So they turned this around. So objectively looking at what they did within the within their organization, of how, thinking outside that mindset, outside that box that they were in. No, we're just the distillers and we just make liquor. It was right, how can we actually respond to kind of what's going on in the world and actually support the community? They distributed and gave, and still do give, gallons and gallons of this away to some of, local businesses in Donegal. You see their hand sanitizer everywhere. And for them, it was still in line with getting their brand out there and supporting their community, because one of their organizations, their whole kind of ethos as an organization is to really try and bring jobs back to local communities. But this still sat with their purpose as an organization. One of the things that really struck me about chatting to James was that one of the quotes he said, he goes, there's no time to get things perfect in a small organization. It was do something small, iterate, get something out there and try. And he says that's their entire business model, which I absolutely love. And it's not just the talk, they actually do it. So I asked him, I was like, you have such an amazing growth mindset. And, I asked him, I was like, if you were talking to people, what would your advice be to them? And it was to be brave and be courageous and constantly ask yourself, what could you do differently and what you could do better? And from that, they have become a success story. They have built their brand massively. They've won awards for some of the whiskies that they released online during COVID. And I would highly recommend giving it a try. But yeah, it's really, really a fabulous company to understand the workings behind. So, yeah.
Lovely.
So demonstrating that growth mindset and the agility in them, of actually thinking outside the box and never, you know, like if they had followed their plan, you know, they responded to change that was going on in the world. They responded to change and they changed their plan and it has been successful.
Yeah. Thank
So,
you
yeah.
very much, Gail. Do you want to change the slide?
Yeah.
Thank you. So it's very interesting because what I love about the previous case study is they were like so dynamic. It was like boom, 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 done. You know, they took opportunity of the market. So this case study is more about a big ship, big organization, well established, one of the top 7 oil and gas companies in the world. You know, they called super majors, and they were proactive. They look at trends, they look at patterns, they analyze the data, and they know that world is shifting. So they were very proactive and innovative in their thinking, and decided, okay, we need to change direction. And they are actually pivoting completely their business model, and they are reimagining and reinventing themselves as an energy company. So it's very interesting because they are completely changing the strategy in the recent years. And what I find it very interesting is they're extremely successful. There is no immediate need for them to do it now, but they've been very proactive in their thinking. So they know, you know, they're good, but they can be better. And there are different opportunities, and probably the current opportunities will dry at some stage. And they are proactively thinking about it and acting on it. And this is extremely difficult. It's similarly when you think about, for example, Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods changed his swing in the peak of his career. So he had a history of success. There was a record of success there, and then he completely pivoted and changed his style. Similarly with Muhammad Ali. He completely changed his style at some point, even though there was a record, a proven success story behind it, and how difficult it is when you are already doing well to think innovatively and do something differently and question the status quo. And similarly to the previous case, everything is very much purpose-driven with VP at the moment. So they have a purpose, which is all about making a planet, you know, looking after our planet, making lives better, lives of the people better, and driving that emission to net zero. So they have a very clear vision, and it's not about profits, it's about making planet a better place and lives a better place. So they can easily, they can very quickly see if the decisions they are making fits with their purpose or they are actually bad decisions. And they've also very collaborative, and they cooperate with some different research institutions. They partner with some organizations. They actually are looking to partner with 10 to 15 major cities worldwide with different industries, helping them to meet their targets on net zero emissions, but also learning. So this is like peer-to-peer experiences, learn opportunities. And also they are looking at sustainable pace. So everything what they're doing, it has a long-term view. So they have a purpose, they have goal, they know where they want to get, but then they divided it in more sustainable steps. So they have achievables for 2025, 2030, 2050. So they divided the action plan to smaller pieces, but still purpose drives them in the right direction.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. I think the contrast between the small, nimble company versus the actual bigger company and turning the oil tanker versus like our evergreen ship, you know, it is always about inspecting, adapting, changing, you know, developing that growth mindset, understanding, you know, trying to actually step away from kind of like, you know, get your head out of the soup and figure out how can we actually survive? What is it that we need to do as an organization to change and become more competitive, essentially? Thanks, Joanna. So any questions on either of those case studies? Any part of it that was really interesting? So just stepping back and looking at all of this in terms of adopting an agile, I guess, mindset, you know, bringing agile practices and a way of thinking, bringing agile leadership into your organization. Essentially, you know, some of the benefits that are there for this, for the taking, are really about becoming more effective and efficient, and having, I guess, what we mean by that is that you've got like a better use of time, in that you will potentially, by working with your customers in a different way, working in a collaborative way, you will essentially develop a better product as you do that as well. So it becomes a better use of time. There's a myth around there. It's like, oh, agile is faster. I don't think it is. It's actually, you just end up with a better product at the end. About getting up and running. So quite often people don't want to start a project until, you know, or a new idea or a new product plan without doing all this detailed planning. That's what our default is, you know, back to our waterfall sequential world. So what Agile allows you to do is actually start really early and start fast and fail fast as you go with that as well. So you can actually start with unknowns and iterate as you go. So the output of what you're iterating on becomes the input into the next iteration of what you're actually building, whether that's a product or a project that you're executing. Increase customer satisfaction around building a better product because you're actually working with your customers. And with inside the organization, employee satisfaction and, you know, why people want to come to work. When they're empowered and, I guess, trusted, developing that kind of, you know, the culture of trust and transparency within organizations. You know, developing this concept around psychological safety, where people feel safe to actually challenge and give ideas, that they're not going to be shot down. You know, it's all about, you know, you see some of these agile organizational kind of charts, and it's like there's leaders at every level. The leaders aren't at the top. The leaders are at every single level within the organization, and everybody within the organization is a leader. So it's always about trying to create that culture where people aren't afraid to be leaders in their own roles, no matter what, you know, stage of their career development that they're at. And then, you know, we looked at Sliabh Liag, like responding to change, like they responded to change and they have increased their competitive advantage. They actually got ahead. They have actually set like a new precedence, like for how distillers will engage with customers as well.
Thank you. So a few takeaways from the session. So when you look at where to start, you know, where would be the best place? So you start with inspecting, and either you inspect what you've done so far, if you try something new, or you just look at data, some evidence. You try to be curious and open-minded. What can we do differently? What are the trends? What are the patterns? Visualization is a great tool in doing that, because by visualization, we actually might see something. We can start seeing how the dots adds up and seeing some patterns, some trends, how, you know, direction that things are taking, and making better decisions. So it's always good to visualize the data regarding processes, but in general, or different data that we are getting. And then once you see some pattern, you come up with some hypothesis, and you try to prove it by small steps. So you think big, you have a big goal, big plan, but then you start small. So you have to make a first step, and it's one step at a time. So you make that step and you learn fast and you pivot. You validate your learnings, and then you if it brings you closer to your destination, you go with it. If not, you pivot, and sometimes completely pivot and come up with completely different direction at that stage. And it's all about sustainability. So you develop a sustainable pace. If you are in the marathon, you don't run with the sprints because you will burn out. There is different pace to it, and this is very important. And then you come up constantly with experiments. You come up with hypotheses, and then you validate. You think, what's the cheapest way for me to validate that idea? And for example, what we are talking about, Steve Jobs, you know, for him, he didn't want to reveal the product, so he was using his own company as a forum for getting feedback on the product. But in general, it's like you think, what's the cheapest, the most efficient way of getting that hypothesis validated? And collaboration, a big one. So I think in the past there was lots about competition. But now I think there's more focus on collaboration. Who can we partner and complement our knowledge so we can actually enhance those learning opportunities between many.
Yeah.
And then you adapt. And this is very important because I really like this picture. This is like a BP case. They know their world is going different direction. For them to staying on the course, even though they are massive now, would bring them to rocks. So very important to be open-minded and look where are we heading? Is it the right direction? And then adapting when you have to. And if it's not a right decision, it's still okay. We can recover from it, because if you do one step at a time, there is the cost of recovering. It's not that high.
Yeah. No, I think all really valid points. And I could talk for an hour on each of these. But I think, like if we were to take, like, so Joanna has given a really good summary, and I guess like some tips in terms of like, right, if you were going back into your organization, like, and this is really focusing on the mindset of like what you would need, what do you need to bring back into your organization to start kind of leading a way of, introducing some of these concepts. What I want to do is just talk through a few of the tools, some of our favorite tools that we would use in terms of developing and trying to bring the agile mindset and the agile way of working into organizations. So design thinking is one of my favorite tools, which is really about, the first step of this. And if you Google any of these, you will get tons more information on it. Empathizing with the people. So you can even, you can even go and like talk to your teammates and understand, well, what challenges are they actually facing? And actually try and, there's loads of different templates for kind of questions that you can ask them during this step of it, to actually figure out, walk in their shoes. What is it that frustrates them? What is it that makes them happy? What is it that makes them sad within their role? What is it that like creates, that actually triggers emotion in them in terms of how they're, what they're doing within their role? Then you define what those problem statements are. Then you ideate, like come up with ideas around, right, how could you solve them? You now have an understanding of the impact of the issues, what the issues are, and then put together a prototype of some sort. So the value and the power of actually, even if it's like an idea for a product or, a slide that describes or visualizes something, the power, Joanna, you spoke about earlier, like the power of visualizing a solution and actually showing something to somebody is far more powerful than actually describing it. Even the way myself and Joanna created these slides in a collaborative way, we actually just started creating something, and then it gave us something. It gives you a starting point to actually discuss, rather than just like describing, well, what is it that we want to talk about in this slide? So it just, by visualizing and sharing a common vision, you've got the same visual, you're both looking at the same thing, and it triggers the ideas in everyone's mind. So it's about putting something, building something, rather than talking about it or describing it or writing a document to describe it. Build it and show it, and then test it, and then go back again. So loop again. In the Scrum values, so you'll notice that we haven't actually included the process of sprints and time boxing. I think everyone is really familiar with that. What we really like about mostly around Scrum is really the values that it actually brings, and the courageousness of that, of like being brave and taking risks. And ask for forgiveness, not permission, in your organization. Step out of your comfort zone and try and like come up with ideas, put them forward, be brave in your decisions around how you're doing that, commit to them, focus on one thing. Don't try and focus on too many things. Like narrow your band, limit your work in progress of what you're trying to do. The openness and the respect and the trust, I think, very much come together. The trust is generated by that respect and openness of being transparent. You're not trying to hide things. You're not trying to, get away from people or not kind of explain what you're doing. It's all about, by being open and honest about your approach and things, it really creates that trust with your partners that you collaborate with or work with all the time. And then in terms of tools, so my number one tool is a Kanban board. I'm surrounded in them. Well, I've got one big one beside me on the wall here. This is about getting your work on a board or your team's work on a board, mapping out what your process is and putting your work in those columns, because the power and the learnings that you will have from just even observing how your work works is actually quite powerful. So the online collaboration tools that I've been using mostly would be the likes of, because obviously we're not in a world where we can kind of put a board on a wall and we can all stand around it every day. We'll be using the likes of Trello, Mural, and we can share these slides afterwards. So there's loads of different tools out there that you can use for these. And, some of those are free, some of them are paid, but.
Just the last, add-on, if you don't mind me adding,
yeah, please.
To me, the most important thing is like, there is a common perception, knowledge is everything, but actually the modern approach to it is the knowledge without execution is nothing. So doing counts much more because you're learning much more by doing than actually studying.
Yeah.
So, so Menti, if you don't mind just sparing with us a few more seconds, we would like to get some feedback.
Yeah. And I guess this is like, so we would love to actually start developing these and kind of like, doing a few more of these sessions. We also have another one, which we'll put up in a second, which is around, well, what questions did we not get to answer today? What did you come along here expecting to learn? Is there certain areas that, if we were to do another one of these, what would that focus on? What would it not focus on? And we would love to get your feedback into that as well. So let me just...
Yeah, and Menti is open, if you don't mind. Okay. We have 2 answers, including mine, 3 answers, yeah. Anybody else would like to give us feedback, please? Yeah. Lovely. Okay, so I will close. Okay, one more. Anybody still voting? We have six replies.
Excellent.
Okay, so I will move to the next one. I will close this one and move to the next one.
So so were there any questions that you would love to have known or to get an answer on, or were your expectations coming along to this different? What gaps are there in your knowledge? What is not? What's fuzzy in your mind right now around business agility?
We are just trying to get some ideas. If you want to organize more of those workshops, what would be useful for you?
So basically, we're using you to try and get information out of you as to what would be good for to do for these. No, we're not. We're obviously delighted to answer your questions. And obviously, if there's any questions now that we've got actually just a minute over, are we?
Yes. Anyway, thank you very much for your time, and see you next time, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Joanna. Thanks, Gail.
Thanks, Karan.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. I really enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to more.
Oh, thanks very much, Koka. Thanks for supporting and coming.
Thanks for coming along at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Can I just say, when I saw the term business agility that I thought would be interesting to join, and I think it's great that we're talking about business agility and not any of those other things like scrums and methodologies and things like that, because this is the most important thing. It's about what value can you create and how can you adapt your organization. So
100%, yeah. And I think the way the IT world has led Agile, like there's so many parts of Agile in IT is so unagile in my mind. It's all these frameworks and methodologies, and yes, they give somebody a template to get started, but really it's about changing the mindset and how you think and how you approach stuff, so yeah.
If I was going to summarize Agile in one word, I would say business agility is about challenging status quo. To me, that's one thing.
Yeah. James actually gave me, when I was chatting to James on Friday, I was so lucky to have a cool conversation with him on Friday. He said, and he's just he doesn't even realize he's an Agile organization. That's what I loved about it. And actually his wife, Maura, she was going to join us this morning, but she didn't obviously make it. But one of the things he wrote down, let me check exactly what he said to me. He said, he's like, frame a question that only you can answer. And his question for their organization was, how do you capture Donegal Coast in a beverage? Like, it was just the powerfulness and like the connection that you can make with that as any human being. I think it's all about trying to bring like more human factors into how we operate, rather than, you know, that to me is what Agile is about. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Look forward to the next one.
Thanks a million, guys. Thank you so much for your
Great start for the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.